and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast. In this one, we'll be talking to Ian Smith and Murray Easton, two founder members of record label Last Night From Glasgow. It's a fascinating discussion, not just about music and the music business, but about a different way to fund the arts, whatever form they may take. It's quite a long podcast, so I'm going to stop here, let you listen to what they have to say, and I'll be back with you after this. Hello everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast, the first of the new year. And tonight we're going to be talking to two of the guys who run Last Night From Glasgow, a record label that started last year and which at this rate is on its way to taking over the world, I think. But Ian Smith and Murray Easton are with me. Hello guys.
Good evening.
Hello. And I guess the first question to ask is, why a record label?
You go for it.
Shall I pitch that? Well, I guess, speaking for myself, I don't know about the rest of the guys, I've been a frustrated, failed, talentless pop star since I was about 13. So I guess I always wanted to do something in music. Never really saw the opportunity present itself. And then I guess where most people reach their middle age and start buying Porsches and doing other things, I had a eureka moment about September, October last year where I suddenly thought that it might actually be possible to start a record label and make it work.
Okay.
And that kind of blossomed over the autumn-winter 2015 until by about January 2016 I had what I reckoned was the basis of a pretty good idea.
Okay.
And then, having banded it around to a few people that I knew, spoken to Teen Canteen because I knew them, spoken to Joe McAlinden of Superstar who I knew quite well, I then took the ridiculous notion that the best advice you could get is from somebody that doesn't know you. And probably, I think, a year ago to the day, it might actually be a year ago to the day, I sent an email to the man on my left to ask him what he thought about the model I had come up with for a record label. And I'll let Murray pick up
and
from
be
there.
honest, what did you think about it?
I thought it was great. Yeah, I thought the concept was bait. So Ian had crowdfunded. He's crowdfunded a lot of records, ranging from The Wedding Present to Teen Canteen and things, and it was based around the crowdfunding concept.
Yep.
Also, Ian's a big fan of Brewdog. Hope you don't mind me saying that. And again, they were a crowdfunded company essentially, and my day job is a fundraiser. I work for the British Art Foundation, and I think it just made so much sense to marry up music and the fundraising thing, limit the risk to us so that we weren't forking out a lot of money for every release. 6 of us that formed the company funded the first release of it. I thought, let's get other people in it. And also it went back to that kind of word of mouth thing, whereas if we've got members, we've got 100 or 150, this year hopefully 200 people talking about each release, tweeting about it, sharing it. Excuse me. And yeah, it just made so much sense. I think Ian's email came through, I sent him one back, and then I said, what's your number? And so we ended up speaking on the phone that night, and it was great.
So kind of, this is such a good idea and I want to be involved in it. That's how strong I felt about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd been thinking about, I was approaching a big birthday as well, and I'd been thinking about doing some kind of wee digital label. But because I know how hard it is for bands to put something out themselves, it does get
Absolutely.
lost. I mean, I've managed bands, who've gone on to decent things, but putting out self-releases is really tough unless you've got a decent following or some kind of platform. And that was a word we both used, I think, like to give bands that kind of platform and help and support.
So at a time when I think a lot of people said, I'm going to start up an indie record label, perhaps that wouldn't be the positive reaction, because it's a difficult thing to be doing. What was it about the plan for Last Night From Glasgow that you thought, this can work?
Well, I think, certainly from my perspective, I look around the city I live in and I see the real sense of that, socialist workers' cooperative concept at the heart of a lot of things I care about. Certainly for me, and I've said this before, and people in the Labour will disagree with my politics and people will disagree with my desires. but I felt Glasgow showed itself to be a truly cooperative socialist city during the independence referendum. I felt there was a real sense of community grew up in this city.
Okay.
And when that ended, it felt to me as if there was kind of a vacuum. There was a lot of hope and aspiration and desire, and it wasn't being channeled.
With nowhere to go, that kind of thing. That's
there's
interesting.
no doubt for me that I was sitting for a good part of 6-7 months quite depressed about the fact all of this hope and drive for something better was going untapped. So I guess now it's obviously flawed when you surround yourself with like-minded people that all my friends shared my views. So when I suggested this, 20 of my mates go, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why it was important to find the opinion from somebody who did not share my circle of friends or did not share my outlook or whatever it may be. But the fact remains, irrespective of your politics, irrespective what things drive you, I think most people are fueled by a desire to do good.
Yeah.
I think generally people like helping other people, and what we really did was give everybody a ready-made opportunity to do something good that they could feel good about themselves. And it enabled us to interact with bands who themselves would feel good about it. And I think, frankly, we've said this to each other and in board meetings for the year, why no one thought of it before us staggers us. You know, it seems such a simple idea. Why did no one else come up with it first?
Especially because a lot of bands and artists had been using crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter, Pledge Music, and labels have been struggling.
Yeah, but we tended to do it for individual projects, I think, rather than this idea of a collective being...
Well, that was the spin that we put on it. We just happened to think of it as far as we know.
And I guess it breaks down. The initial thing that got me thinking about it was when I did the pledge campaign for Carl and Teen Canteen's album. And I remember I remember getting the email about the pledge campaign. I remember looking at it and thinking, well, I can chuck some money at this and make it happen. But I remember at the back of my mind, my primary desire for this campaign was that the album come out in vinyl.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, yeah, it's great, it's going to be terrific, they'll play a gig in my house, that'll be marvellous. But what I really want is this record to come out in vinyl. And long before I hatched the idea of coming up with setting up a record company, I'd researched how much it would actually cost to make 300 Teen Canteen albums.
Right.
And I was in the throes of wondering if I could just find 120 mates that would all chuck in, the 10 quid it would take to pay to press a Teen Canteen album. And it's that process of thinking, actually, if you all pull together and we built up this idea of a model and then you break it down and build it with a better concept. Because I think the original plan that I'd put to Murray was a little more complex than the one we have just now. It was still, in essence, the same basic principle. But what we did is, over a lunch in Brewdog one day and another lunch in Doghouse, whatever it was, perversely the bars that Murray's already mentioned, I've got a fancy for.
Good advert.
I think over those 2 or 3 hours and a few meetings and a few chats and discussions with the guys, we knocked it into a shape that, whilst we were nervous about, we reckoned we could make work. We could all find 10 or 12 people who would buy into this, and if we could all find 10 or 12 people, we needed 60 to make it work. 100 would be wonderful. Anything above 100, would start to be a bonus we weren't expecting and require more work. And I think it took us about a month and a half to get the 60 people we wanted. And by the time we actually officially launched the label at the launch night in the Old Hairdressers in June, we had nearly 100 members.
Yeah. So Ian and I each brought 2 people to the table to form a board of 6, and we met for the first time. The first time the 6 of us had been in the room, the first time many of us in that 6 had met each other, and at the end of February, 22nd of February, and we came up with a name, and we just had that pool of talent where Andy said, I'll sort the website, I'll register the company name. We just had a really good team, and that team's just expanded with the artists we've got involved and with the members like yourself who've come on board. And I think one thing we want to do moving forward is make sure we use the skills more. Say to people when they're joining the label, what do you do, and
you want to get more involved in it.
We're going to give you all this stuff. Is there anything else you can...
I think it's nice now that what's happening, especially with membership renewals. I had a lady I won't name check who renewed today, but if she's listening, she'll know who I'm talking about, because after renewing, I thanked her. She sent me an email saying, look, if ever you need anything taken anywhere by car, or you want someone to help you out in the door of a launch night, just ask me. And I said earlier, I had a guy this morning looking into some legal matters for us as a member of the label, and just absolutely delighted to help. You don't want to ask in the first year, because in the first year you're saying, give us your money, trust us. We're a bunch of scallywags who think we can start a record company. I would genuinely like to think by now that we've got 150, well, we've actually got 190 members as of today, but I'd like to think the vast majority of them are sitting back and thinking, that was a good 50 quid I spent.
So going back to the original model, because when you were looking for those members, it struck me that you weren't trying to overreach yourself. You weren't going, right, let's get 1,000 people in. It was like, this is what we want, and that's our cut-off point. And if you're a bit later than that, well, maybe you can get in next year. But and that made it feel like, well, this is something that is one, it's been really thought about. It's not just trying to chase every penny or pound that's out there, but there's a control here which kind of makes you think, well, this is something special.
But there also has to be a control there. I mean, I'll sell ourselves short when I say this. We all have full-time jobs. We all have responsibilities, we have families, we have things to do. If we can only run a company that is manageable on a part-time basis. You can't have a company managed on a part-time basis that's got a membership of 1,000, because the turnover of that business would require us to be producing twice the number of records we're producing. If we started doing that, we'd be spreading ourselves thin. I think as it is, a couple of times last year and probably a couple of times this year, we've been running about like headless chickens because there's so much going on. But at the same time, we've managed it and we've made it work. So the capping is partly because we'd like everyone to feel they're part of something. We'd like to know everyone. I'd like to think every member in the label knows me because they've spoken to me. And I'd like to think that I know something and everybody knows something about those members. We want them to feel that they're part of the label. They've got to feel part of it. That means you have to keep it small. But there's also the other fact, when you're brass necking it in March last year and going to people and saying, give me 50 quid, we're starting a company, we hope to not make a complete cod of it. You can really only ask your mates.
That's true.
And actually with our mates, didn't we? But the faith that they put into us was incredible. Not just our close friends, social media friends. People that you kind of got some kind of connection to. But I remember I put a post on Facebook one night, and loads of people are saying great idea, and that we felt it was a great idea. We wouldn't have run with it otherwise. But when other people are saying, we think this is great, there's £50, they didn't have a clue what kind of music we were bringing out. Well, I guess they knew our taste, but they didn't know what artists were involved. But
I remember sitting in maybe this house or a pub one night talking about it, and I remember saying I felt it was incredibly important that we recruited as many members as possible before we put a release out. Because the minute we put a release out, we will immediately be labelled as that type of label. So our first record was a sparse piece of Scots Americana with an Icelandic B-side. Now that's a pretty, in itself, the record itself is quite diverse. But I imagine that everybody that heard that immediately thought, Last Night From Glasgow are a folk label. So we very quickly had M. Wood's record up our sleeve, and we also had Stephen Solo's digital album. So by the time we got to the launch night, we had a piece of bluesy rock touching on alternative indie. We had some nutjob iPhone electronica and a piece of folk, and everybody that came to that launch night walked away clueless as to the direction of the label. So it was really important that people bought into the concept, didn't buy into the music.
I think it goes back to what you said really early on, is that there's a desire for people to support for want of a better term, the arts. You know, when arts funding is getting cut here all over the place, someone says, right, you can support these musicians in getting their music out there. A lot of people will be like, before they even hear it, going, well, I'm right behind that, and if I can help, I will do that.
Yeah.
And I think also, and we've always had this sense of belief that the fans and the artists and the board and everybody will get together and they'll share a lovely common space, but that was completely proven to us on the night of the launch event, where we had 100 people rammed into the old hairdressers. And I've genuinely probably been to 500 concerts, 600 concerts in my life. I've never been to a concert where the audience were as reverential as they were that night. There was absolute silence for every artist. And after everyone played, the artist spent time talking. Stephen had probably never played a solo gig in his life. He was petrified before he walked on stage, and he came off stage to people saying that his performance had changed their life. He left staggered. Mark stood and watched Morgan. Morgan stood and watched Mark. The girls from Teen Canteen, who hadn't yet signed to the label but we hoped would, turned up to watch everyone. And I think everybody walked out the other night having a borderline religious experience. They thought, there's something here.
What was interesting, I mean, there were so many interesting things. I think I agree with Ian. The atmosphere from that night, I hope we get an atmosphere like that again, but it was very special. Mark had never played with his band before, never really rehearsed with them. He just knew they were good players that would come in and do a job. Morgan, I don't think had played live with an electric guitar before.
She'd played the electric guitar, but she'd never played as N was. She'd been as someone.
And Stephen had recorded this album that he never thought would come out as an album, and we were putting it out, and he somehow had to play it live. And someone came up to him and said that was worth 50 quid membership fee alone, and you know there was tears and things, and a lot of the members were there on their own because the limited capacity. We couldn't offer everyone a +1.
Sure.
So it encouraged everyone to talk to each other, and they knew they were all music fans. They'd all bought into this concept, and the 3 performances were absolutely brilliant. So everyone kind of was just buzzing afterwards. I mean, I didn't come down for days on end.
So, I mean, that kind of must have been, when you were planning this out, that kind of reaction and the reaction in general must be beyond your kind of wildest dreams, I would think.
I've struggled over the last year to get a grip on what's going on. And I think I imagine that Murray's probably a little bit behind me in struggling to get a grip on what's going on, and I think Stephen and Joe and Andy and Ross have got a better grip on what's going on, because to a certain extent they're more involved in the practicality of it. But as far as the front line goes, I spend my life, I almost need to sit down with situations like this. I need people to talk to me so I can convince myself that I haven't imagined the whole thing. I really struggle to come to terms with it. I think it might take me a couple of years to look back and actually realise we've done it. And now I can remember the launch night. I remember Murray phoning me 2 days later saying, "What do you think of that?" And me saying, "I can't remember it." I walked around clueless for the entire night. So it sounds like I'm terribly desperate for gratification. I'm not. I just would like people to tell me what they think, because I struggle to grasp it's actually happening.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, I mean, we're kind of jumping ahead a bit, we can go back, but now that people are renewing, and now is the time where we are getting incredible feedback from people, you know. I mean, I met a friend of mine last night, Phil, who said he had such a, you know, he renewed, and he said he had such a lovely email from Ian. And I think that's the thing, that, you know, we do want people to feel a real part of it, and we want them to be thanked, and also we want to provide good customer service. You know, from our communication to them, and certainly the feedback we've been getting is positive.
Just to go back briefly to the live experience, it is like everyone has been, I suppose everyone has been invited individually, but you get people, as you say, coming up to you saying, "How are you? Are you involved in this yet?" and all this stuff. And so you get usually diverse acts, as you see, you've got some from Stephen, you know, Morgan, you've got all these different people, but everyone's just going, "That's brilliant, what's next?" And that's amazing. In fact, the Christmas gig that you put was on in Mono was exactly like that. Everyone was just like, you know, going, "This is
the atmosphere of that was really
and it was joyous actually when you went backstage at that and you saw Mark's band sitting talking to Boo Hoo Hoo and then talking to someone else. And it's that you really want to create. You want the artists and the bands to feel like they are part of something that cherishes them and you know, appreciates their talent. But then you've got to hope that they will turn around and show that appreciation back to the fans. And what's been really interesting is over the last few weeks is watching artists join the label.
Right.
So we've had people that are in bands suddenly say, I want to be part of this.
That's
really lovely when that happens. It's lovely when anyone joins. Anytime someone joins the label, I'll promptly email them and ask them how and why. Mm-hmm. I had a guy a few weeks ago from Seattle, from nowhere, came on and bought all of Boo-Hoo-Hoo's EPs, one of each colour. It's the same EP, but they're different colours. He bought one of each colour, and I wrote to him saying, "My word, that's a statement of adoration of a band. Thanks very much for your support. Every penny we get's really important. Thanks for." And simply by writing to him, he joined the label. And then after joining the label, he bought our entire back catalogue.
Yeah.
So suddenly I was shipping Mark's record, Morgan's record, Charlotte's record, Team Canteen's USB, the last copy of Stephen's album, to a guy in Seattle who will never make it to a launch event. But in principle, he's not going to get. But he's joined the forum. He's there. He's seeing things, and even from there, he's picked up in some sense of community, and that's incredibly rewarding when that happens.
Yeah. And that's something, I guess. You can say, "Right, we're going to do this, and we're going to release music," but the idea of then having a roster of bands and also an audience who interact in that way, I guess. Part of that's luck, or part of it is just, this is what we believe, and if you believe what we believe, then you'll follow us in a kind of Pied Piper way.
I think the thing, we've skipped past this, but actually I think prior to the launch night, the night that told me we were really onto something special was a Monday night in Distill, the bar in Argyle Street. Leading up to this Monday night in Distill, we'd been talking amongst the label, and we knew that Brian Sweeney, the photographer and visual artist, was going to be doing the artwork for Mark's single.
Right.
And I sent Brian an email saying, thank you very much for donating this artwork. It's incredibly precious. We love the fact you've done it. We're going out Monday night for a board meeting. It'd be lovely if you pop in for a beer. And Brian turned up for a beer. And Brian sat down next to myself and Stephen. I don't know if you were here at this point or not, but he sat down next to Stephen and I, and I'm sure Joe was there or Andy was there, and Brian said, I'm going to say something to you now. Feel free to tell me to bugger off. But I was thinking I might become your label photographer. And we all looked at each other and thought, hang on a minute. This is a guy at the top of his game. This guy's done PJ Harvey, he's filmed Coldplay, he's made Teenage Fan Club videos. This guy's hardly struggling for work, and he's actually asking if he can work with us. And we haven't managed over the year to do everything that Brian would like to do, but what's incredible about that is the fact that here's somebody who's looked at this bunch of reprobates and gone, their heart's in the right place, my heart's in the right place, let's do stuff together. And I think at the point Brian offered his services, I think we all stopped and thought, maybe we're onto something here.
Yeah, and I think going back to the launch night as well, Brian, produced the artwork for Mark's single. So again, putting that out with the Sweeney artwork, Mark on it, the guy from Leaves in Iceland on it, produced by Rod Jones from Microdale. It was, it was like, wow, where are they getting this guy from? Because Mark was completely unknown.
Yeah, and Brian turned up to that launch night, and before he delivered or presented Mark's video, which was projected onto a sheet against the back wall, Brian decided to deliver a speech to the audience. Now, I can repeat none of this speech, it's unrepeatable. But everybody that was there, I think, will take Brian's speech to the grave.
Yeah, it was
astounding. This absolute, we're here to destroy the establishment, this is going to change the world, none of which is ever going to happen. But to see Brian Sweeney stand up with such passion and control an audience of people who thought, my word, we've stumbled onto something here.
It was punk.
It was great.
So I'm interested as well then about how you've kind of built or taken on board the bands that you have, because as we say, they seem to really work well together. Very different often in terms of the music they have, but there does seem to be not just the record label that links them, there seems to be something else as well.
I think there is. I think Murray came to the first meeting having known Mark, having been involved in some capacity with Velveteen Saints, whether as a fan or helping out, but knew them. And Murray turned up with this suggestion of the first release, And I think everybody in the board went, well, frankly, this is a great idea. Mm-hmm. It's also the first idea, so it's probably the right idea. And I think there was a general sense of this seems like a good egg.
Yeah.
Murray, Mark, and I met for a coffee, and I left that thinking, well, he's definitely a good egg. Mm-hmm. You know, he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy you want to help.
Yeah.
You know, probably about a month earlier, I had already met Morgan, already expressed to Morgan that I thought she was supremely talented, and expressed a desire. And I think what's happened over the course of the year, and the other guys won't mind us saying it, for the most part, it's either been Murray coming up with a band and saying I think we should work with these people, or it's been me coming up with a band and saying I think we should work with these people. Mm-hmm. And probably one for one, that's been what's been happening. Through the one exception would be Teen Canteen, where we both turned up and said we should be working with these people. And I genuinely think we've got to a point now, we talked about this the other night when we all got together, that if somebody suggests an artist, they're probably worth being suggested.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's going to get past that point of one person editing them, I mean, the classic example would be the last artist we signed, Sister John. We had a meeting with Amanda here on a Monday night, and by the Tuesday I'd emailed the guys, and by the Wednesday we'd agreed it, and by the Friday we'd released a single. And it was incredibly fast, and most of it comes down, from my perspective, to meeting with people and saying, really like them. They get it.
Yeah.
You know, Ian McKinnon and Medicine Men's a great example of that. Murray had been talking about Ian and Medicine Men for months, and we met for a beer 2 weeks ago. And you meet Ian and think, we're cut from the same cloth. Mm-hmm. Completely different backgrounds, completely different lifestyles, but cut from that same cloth of cooperation. And I think all of our acts come from that background of let's help each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely. And I think we as a label, you know, as Ian said, we do have jobs and families and other interests as well. You know, we're putting so much time into it, so, you know, we don't have to be friends with our artists. If we become friends, great, but we want to get on with them.
Yes.
You know,
it's too short. Life is too short.
Exactly. We want to work together, and yeah, you know, the meeting with Ian was great. Sister John, we just went phenomenally well. They came to, what was it they came to?
They came to Boo-Hoo-Hoo, and that's the funny thing. There's Sister John, who I don't know how you'd categorise them, but I would not have expected that band to be at the front of the Nice and Sleazy's watching Boo-Hoo-Hoo, but they were. Mm-hmm. And by the end of it, they're all chatting and getting on. And the other week I noticed Johnny from Sister John sending Mark a message on Facebook about how excited he was about the album, and then I see Mark sending a message back. And I know Mark and Carla met the other week to discuss things, and I know Morgan is chatting to Boo-Hoo-Hoo about doing stuff together. So there's a real sense that they're part of a community, and that's a joy.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there are cliques in Glasgow, there always will be, but by and large, I think, you know, you get a sense of you get a feel for someone, or you get a feel for their band or the music they're putting out, and the feeling that we're building is one of involvement in community and help and support, you know. So yeah, and that Mark met Carla to discuss, you know, he's like, God, you know, I got a problem with this, registering these songs for blah blah blah, and you know, Carla met him to sort out, you know, and that's fantastic. I think, you know, the support that like Stephen Souls had, and that, you know, he's this guy who's brought out a great album, but you know, some of it's quite crazy, very eclectic, and all of a sudden he's got, like, you know, Boo-Hoo saying that's brilliant, and he's going, that's brilliant, I made your album 4 years ago. You know, and there's that sense of humour, and there's that sense of appreciation, and I think also the appreciation for the label, the fact that especially the artists that have been involved from early doors, like Mark and Morgan and Stephen, they've seen this, you know, our online private forum for members build, and the feedback that people are giving the label, and the feedback that people are giving them online, but also at the shows, you know, really coming up to them and showing them support. Like Stephen did that support slot at the Poetry Club, and he said, you know, a few label members came up to him and
he supported for you,
and just said, you know, you're brilliant, you know. And
so you've got to, from a kind of standing start, you've got to this stage now with, you know, quite a few releases in a short space of time under your belt, and various artists. How do you then, are you is it a time of taking stock and working with the artists you have, or is it a case of saying, let's just go back to the idea about, this is part-time, we have other things on the go, we don't want to be too big or try and grow it too big. And the reason I've said this is because, as you all know, it's happened previously. People have tried to, grow
we
big. We
can't grow too big. I think within the label we have... Everybody's able to pull the reins back in someone else, and nobody does it more to each other than Murray and I do it to each other. I'll have flights of fancy and Murray will stamp on it, Murray will have flights of fancy and I'll stamp on it. But generally, there's a will to move in a certain direction. I think we get to a point where we're comfortable, and I think 2 or 3 months ago we were probably sparring a little bit about where this year was going to go, and then gradually certain things fell into place. I know Murray will know what I'm talking about when I say that, because it's generally he and I that are sparring about where we're going to go, and then suddenly he'll see me going, well, I'm okay with that, we'll just do that, and then Murray will say, well then I'm probably okay with that, and before we know where we are, we find ourselves sitting in February going, that'll be 11 releases we've got planned in. Now that actually makes the year an awful lot easier. It also makes it a little sad that we probably won't have the opportunity to discover something bizarre and spectacular halfway through the year. But I think, excuse the noise of my dog in the background, I think probably what will happen is we'll run in 2-year cycles.
Right.
I get the sense that year 1 was generally introducing a lot of acts, and year 2 was cementing them. I think year 3 will be back to introducing more acts, and year 4 will be cementing them. But we have to also realise that our objective is for these bands to break. And if they're going to break, they have to leave us. So we have to also be trying to send our kids out to the world. And we take an interest in different bands individually, and we try and do that. We will try actively and get our bands signed by other labels. It'll break my heart if one of the bands leaves to go to a major, but at the same time I'll be the first person standing in the platform cheering and waving them off. Because that's what we have to do. I imagine some bands... interestingly, when Louder Than War wrote about us, they made the comment that Mark might be our Vinnie Riley. Well, it would be lovely to think we had somebody we could support forever, but it would also be lovely to think that we would be a stepping stone onto something bigger and maybe not better than us, but greater than us. And that's got to be what our long-term objective is. We started this business so artists could break. We didn't start it to hang on to them.
But at the same time, there will be artists who are really happy with our model and the support we get. If we put something out for them and it sells well, and they get to play live, they might be quite happy with that. At the same time, we've got this new model, and older models are struggling.
Well, I was going to say that, because it used to be, the stereotype was indie label breaks a band, major comes along, takes them, and and repeats. But is that still the case in the same way?
Probably not. There's probably no reason why we couldn't find distribution and be able to break bands, because let's be honest, a band is not going to break worldwide based upon vinyl sales. So our model is about small runs of vinyl. But whilst we may have printed 300 copies of everyone's records in the last 12 months, we've distributed all their music onto worldwide platforms that enable endless streaming, endless plays. And I printed a map off a few months back of where our streams are going, and you look at it and you think, my word, they're listening to us in Brazil, and they're listening to us in Japan, and they're listening to us over here. So it is feasible that an artist could stay with us and become bigger. And I would love to think that if one of our artists broke and became big, that they might want to just do a little... Let's do the first 300 with LNFG, and we'll do the next 5,000 with Capital.
Well, that's the other thing.
That would be glorious.
We could work with another label on a release, whether it's another Scottish label or a kind of more established indie, who could maybe just help get the publicity for an artist that we as yet can't get. We had a big, one of the kind of sparring sessions we had quite early on in the label was, do we put some of the money towards, like a PR agency? And we all kind of, I think now if we were having that vote, it would be 5-1 probably out of the label, because we want the money to go to releases and to the
Yeah.
artists. We do not want it to go to someone who, okay, from my experience, sometimes they just push send in an email.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Also,
I mean, you'll receive stuff from agencies, I guess,
Absolutely,
in
yeah.
the blog. I do too.
Yeah.
And I think, no.
But
Generally going round to a huge list of, all they put is put your name on a
Yeah.
list of things.
But,
and
but
that's it.
also what you're doing is you're propping up the house of cards that has been responsible for milking the music industry for so long. So I think we really wanted to do the right thing. And if doing the right thing means occasionally turning away from the obvious decision or the commercial decision, that has to be the right course of action. I think, I remember saying to Murray, 2 or 3 months ago, if convention says we should move north, we should immediately turn our heels and move south. We should just do that. We should just be perpetually, doing the opposite of what convention dictates. I'd like to think over the last 3 months in particular, we've made huge strides in terms of publicity. You're noticing people finding out about us where we haven't tried to make them find out about us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are naturally coming to us. And I make a point of asking anybody who comes to us, where did you find out about us from? And it might be, I heard the track being played on Radio 6, or I read about the Everton fanzine who cover all of our reviews, the When the Skies Are Grey fanzine love us. Now that means that you've got people sitting at Goodison Park on a Saturday afternoon flicking through a thing and reading a review of M. Wood's single.
Yeah.
There's something lovely about that.
Yeah, and that natural momentum is it's just got so much more strength to it than something that's false.
Yeah.
We're not desperate to get in. God, obviously we want to get our artists on the radio or written about, and that's what they want as well.
Of
but
course.
at the same time, anything that happens naturally through word of mouth is better. And again, coming back to the members and having all these people that are wanting to help us and share things and tweet things, automatically means that each release has got a lot of people talking about it. If we sell out on top of that, like M's first singles nearly a sellout. Teen Canteen sold out really quickly.
Yeah.
You've got all these people suddenly talking about
Before
things.
we get to our anniversary, Morgan, Teen Canteen, Boohoo Hoo, Stephen Solo will all be sold out. Mark's not a kick in the shirt behind that single wise. So yeah, I think we're starting to make progress. I think what's interesting is I don't pay an awful lot of credence to top tens or ones to watch lists, but if you'd said to us at the start of the year we'd get to the end of the year, and when Jim Gellertley put up his 10 acts to watch next year, if 2 of our acts were on that list, we'd have not believed you. 2 are on that list. And then Vic Galloway does the same, and another act is on the list. So we're making and establishing a base camp without having to give up on the things we care about. We haven't sold our soul to the devil. We haven't compromised on our principles, and people are starting to pay attention to it.
And I think the way you get the music out there as well is so fragmented now, as opposed to, it used to be you maybe had to get on Radio 1 or Radio Clyde's main playlist, or you're not going to get heard. But you see, BBC's fragmented. You've got the, Radio 6. You've got various podcasts that might put new music out. You see, the things about getting into places like football fanzines or stuff like that. Usually, that's similar-minded people who are obsessed about what they write about and like other people who have a similar obsession.
And that's the thing. I think people that it's fascinating the number of people that come to label and buy a record and then chat to me, for example, an email for a couple of days, and before you know it, they've joined the label because they just get that. And that's what we've got to do. We have to grow in a slow manner and attract as many like-minded people as possible, and we will undoubtedly have some attrition. There'll be some people who go, well, that's not really what I thought it would be, or they might have wanted something from the label we didn't quite deliver. But I'd like to think, by the time we get to June this year, we'll have, the 200 members we're looking for, and we'll have the year mapped out and the releases all there, and we'll actually be able to deliver to those members even more than they got last year. And my lord, last year they got much more than we promised. And that's incredibly joyful that we said we've got 2 albums and 2 singles, and they walked away. Even the most cynical people walked away going, my word.
And this year with EP, more rather than 7 inches, it's looking more like EPs.
Well, something like 5 albums, an EP, and certainly a digital album and a bundle of digital singles. I mean, it's 100+ quid's worth of records plus 30 quid's worth of gigs.
Yeah.
For 50 quid.
Well, let's talk about the releases themselves, because what struck me when I first, went on your website and, the design of everything, I thought, this looks fantastic, apart from anything else. I mean, the look of it,
That's Andy to thank for that. He'll be pleased.
Well, absolutely, it was. I mean, it's not often the case. Sometimes you go and think, this immediately you went, this looks, like something you want to be involved in. And then you get into the releases, the quality of the Stephen's credit card, USB stick, Boohoo's, wristband of different colours, as you say. And then you've also got the vinyl itself. What decisions did you come about how to release these different artists in those formats?
I distinctly remember wanting it to be a vinyl company. Mm-hmm. But then I remember, and Stephen will be the pivotal aspect in this, I remember having a meeting here where Murray was saying we should put out Stephen's album, and I was saying, how can we press onto an audiophile product something that was recorded on a phone? No disrespect intended to Stephen. No. Stephen will get this completely. Stephen will absolutely laugh at this fact, because he completely gets where we're coming from. I wanted that release to be physical. And I've always, now Murray will disagree and tons will disagree, I've always hated CDs. I've never seen the point of a CD. I don't get what they're for. But I thought, well, actually initially my idea was, let's put it on a membership card.
Right.
And let's have the members bring that membership card to every gig, and when they turn up at the gig, we'll download something new. Somebody was quick to point out that the actual time involved in doing that would make it absolutely unworkable.
300 people
before we got to that stage, I actually wanted to bring it out as an app. Then I found out that apps cost a good few grand.
But I think the idea was, let's bring it out in a card. Well, let's bring it in a USB format. We looked at it, we saw cards, that worked great. Teen Canteen saw us doing that, and they approached us and said, will you put our album in USB? So we did it for them as well. Boohoo was much more down to time constraints, because they wanted the tracks to be remixed by Lewis Gardner of Pride's, and they wanted to release them, and we wanted them out by a day, and the timeline to press a record's about 12 weeks from start to finish. The timeline to make a USB is a couple of weeks. So I remember saying to them, guys, right, we're going to put it in a wristband, and the wristband will be the ticket for the gig, and people won't have to get a stamp on their finger. And everybody in the band, I found out afterwards, thought I'd lost it. They genuinely thought, but they were too polite to say, we can't say no because effectively the label's paying for this. Yeah. But then gradually over time, they started going. I remember turning up to B. Charlotte's concert with a mock-up of what it was going to look like, and slapping it in Greg's wrist, and Greg getting a smile on his face. Yeah. And then Lizzie loving it. And then I met Ricky on the day we released him, and I gave him a few, and he said to me in Central Station, handed over a bag of them. I wasn't sure about this, but And actually, at the launch night, it was tremendous, because people turned up and they got their wristband, and ones that hadn't pre-ordered one wanted one. Yeah. So I've never seen us shift more units at a launch night than we did of Boohoo. We pressed the same number of those as we did of everyone else, and we've got about 15 left.
Jim Gallagher thought it was great, and he's gone to write about them, play them. Yeah, and I guess because he just got it, he didn't have to be emailed to release or anything, he just got it slapped around his wrists.
And you get to wear it. I thought I'd be wearing it for months, but I gave mine away. Or they gave one of mine away. There's still a couple over there. But I love the fact that you can wear it and folks say, what's that? And I remember at the Christmas effect, Leo from Mount Dout chatting to me, and me handing one to him, and him just thinking it was just a wristband, and he looked a bit confused, and I pulled the slip away, and you could see the dawning realisation that it's a flipping album on this, and there's something lovely about that, to the point now that I'm trying to work out if we can release Stephen Solo's next album in a USB cake slice, which I think might be too much.
This is also something you've got to talk about.
But it goes back to a question you asked earlier. So there was a slice of luck in that. Yeah. And thinking it's not going to. I did want to really bring it out in vinyl if we could, but I totally understand why we couldn't. Due to the potential sound issues. But it was that slice of luck that worked really well. Yeah. It was like a cool talking point, and it went on to transfer to like Teen Canteen and Boohoo.
And the other great thing, some real accidents happened with that, because when you work in USB and you work in that format, and you're sending information to manufacturers, you send it in a slightly different format. And we'd manufactured, 300 of these Stephen Solo albums, and we started selling them, and then Electronic Sound Mag picked up on it and wrote an article about it, and then people who read Electronic Sound Mag bought it. And then one day I got an email from a guy, and the email read, "Is this album meant to be alphabetical?" And I stopped in my tracks and thought, I've never ever thought about this before. And I emailed Stephen to say, mate, we might have released your album alphabetically. Was it meant to be alphabetical? And he said, no, but I think it's better that way. So the album's become alphabetical.
So it just kind of formatted its way, like,
well, tracks A to Z.
As you
it
would
just
do
listed them. And it never occurred to us. So now we have to preface everything with a number, or otherwise it alphabetises it. But Stephen was great about it. I actually quite like it alphabetical, and now it's alphabetical.
USB also allows you to put on lots of extras, so you could put on videos, demos. Stephen had artwork, poems,
Boo-hoo-hoo had a downloadable tattoo, and a flute transcript of the flute solo. So you can do all that kind of stuff that I think makes up for the fact it's not a record.
And it's also that kind of stuff that people who are really into the music, it's like we were talking about hidden tracks earlier on, going out a piece of vinyl and reading the little inscription on, it's that little bit extra that people who obsess over the music really want. It makes a big difference to them.
Yeah, I remember reading some of the tweets that were coming in from people that were getting these, and there was a whole ream of people getting them and filming themselves putting their Boo-hoo-hoo wristband on and talking about just how bizarre it was. I don't think we plan this year to do anything else totally nut job, but we will probably release something in a format, and when it comes to it, we'll sit down and go, how can we do this? What will be interesting about this?
The original thing was about the quality, and the quality of everything you've released has been, as high as I can think of it. Was that something that you decided early on? If we're going to do this, we're going to make sure it's the best.
Absolutely. We had to make a statement with the first release, and we followed that up very quickly with Morgan's, like both had the Brian Sweeney artwork. Both just the kind of label insert sticker. What do you call that?
You call it the label.
The label that's on the record, in the middle of the record, looked great. We were just really proud and happy to put it out. And I think the kind of look and feel of it was just fantastic. The sound, the two accompanying videos for Mark and Morgan's singles were both fantastic. Both Brian Sweeney. So we made a statement, and we've just kind of followed that up. And now we don't want to.
Yeah, you reach that sound. You don't want to go below that.
We don't. I mean, that was something we talked about a lot before we started the label. It had to be good quality stuff.
You mentioned briefly Vinnie Riley and going on at Factory Records, but what did you have influences or models about who you would like to kind of follow in terms of record companies?
I've always been a record buyer. I've never really cared that much for who the label was. I mean, of course, you look at Factory and you think, well, there was something tremendously punk and wonderful about that, but I never looked at them and thought they knew what they were doing.
No.
So I think in some sense we might have a little bit of that Factory spirit at heart.
Well, when I saw your credit cards and I was thinking about Vinnie Riley's Sandpaper Sleeve, or of course the Blue Monday cover that lost money every time it was sold.
So there's that element of trying to be a little bit avant-garde, but also at the heart of it is it's got to be good quality, and we know what we're doing as businessmen. We're not naive and charging in. We're sitting down just now. We know what our budget and our plan is for the year, and every single time a record gets bought, I'll very quickly adjust our budget, and if that puts $2.99 in our profit or takes £1 off it, we know constantly where we are. We know whether we've got to push things or whether we can accelerate or not. The real excitement last year was that we started the year thinking we're going to do 2 singles and 2 albums. And very quickly, I remember sitting in this house having a meeting one night, and Stephen and I and Murray having a 3-way conversation where Stephen and I were saying, we're going to make more money and we're going to have to spend it.
Right.
And I'm thinking, if we're going to have to spend it, we can't wait till we've got it to spend it, because that'll be too late. We have to start spending it now. We're not going to release 4 things this year. We're going to do 6 or 7 things, as it was.
That was an interesting conversation.
As it
Because we're
was.
not for profit.
Yes, of course.
Label, you know.
As it was, we did 11 things last year. You know, and some of that came out of nowhere. But we planned to release 4 things, and suddenly one of them takes off, and Teen Canteen does well. So that's what makes Morgan and Boo Hoo Hoo possible. And then Boo Hoo Hoo does well, so suddenly Sister John becomes possible.
Yeah.
And if Sister John does well, then something else becomes possible. So we could find ourselves in November this year sitting there going, well, we need to do something with the money we've got.
Yeah.
And I think if we get to that, I think I'm speaking out of turn here, I think if we get to that point that we have surplus, we will look to find a way of investing that in artists in a non-release mechanism.
Yeah.
If we can sit down and say, guys, there's a recording fund, or there's a promotional fund, or there's a fund for a tour, the fact is we're never going to bank a profit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can't. There is only so many releases we can put out each year, for our own sanity, and also to make sure the artists aren't in too much competition with each other if we're bringing out something all the time.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's potentially the next exciting step for the label, is if our releases come out and do well, and in particular this year, because we're bringing out EPs, mini albums, or albums, and it sounds boring, but if you bring out a 7-inch single, you really don't make any money at all.
Yeah.
Because, you know, to sell it at like even £5 is kind of like that's you make about £2 of that if you sold out. But if you're bringing out an album, then there's more money for artists. They're going to make more money. We're going to get more money back to invest in other artists, and then we can look at saying, do you know what, Brian Sweeney can do this for you, some kind of crazy video concept, or do you know what, we're going to book a week in Lechonky. We're going to get all you guys in a room together for a week and see what you can come up with. Something crazy like that.
I remember sitting here in July or August. I mean, the thing was, at the outset of the label, we met every month practically, and then over the last 6 months, we've met when somebody has said, I need to get you in a room to talk about things. We've developed this lovely flow of trust, which is glorious. And I think probably Murray and I speak every couple of days, and then I see Andy and Stephen every week, and you'll see Joe quite regularly as well. So there's that flow of knowing what's going on. But I remember sitting in a meeting here one night where Stephen was trying to explain to Murray the fact that he felt we had built the world's first functional Ponzi scheme.
Right.
That every single bit of success we had meant more releases, which meant more success, which meant more releases. And Stephen and I then spent a good 2 or 3 days looking at spreadsheets and trying to work out the point at which we broke it. Because there would come a point that it absolutely breaks. And I think we worked out, and that's where we've got to this point this year, where we understand what 200 members means and what that means for production numbers and what it means for artist return. Because there could come a point where every £50 membership costs us £52.
Yeah.
At that point, we've broken the model. But it's fascinating, especially when you get to a situation that you've maybe released 5 records, they're all sitting in your warehouse, and the warehouse is that table in the corner which you can see, and that's the size of our warehouse. If somebody comes along who's bought Teen Canteen's album and suddenly wants to join the label, well, technically speaking, what they're doing is taking stock that we've got off us and paying us for the privilege.
Yeah.
So they become a really valuable customer. But then you've got them next year and suddenly they're taking things off you on a cost basis. So the economics of it is fascinating. What's interesting
Hopefully
here
fascinating for your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is.
but my point is that what's interesting about this is I don't imagine Factory, when they started, had anybody who would sit and think, hang on a minute, we might be about to break this.
Yeah.
And I think we have that, because we've all run businesses, we've all got jobs.
The books I've read about Factory.
I think everybody's got a little... You know, Stephen will email me at 11 o'clock and say, I think you've missed something. I'll say, no, I haven't. I'm on to this stage. And Stephen will say, that's great. Everybody's got this little ability. So tonight, when we sent money to someone to pay for a record, within 10 minutes I had 2 text messages, one confirming it was gone and one confirming the next stage. So what we've got is a very clued up people trying to run a punk business.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a slight difference.
We need to get that on the website.
So next time I come in here, it's not going to have like £1 million table that you've ever
Definitely not. But we might buy a club. Funnily enough,
See, it all comes
We're
out.
talking.
Our
Never mind
friend,
this recording budget.
our friend Davey that does our production artwork for us, so he's the guy that checks all our graphics and makes things work. David's also a business consultant, and he found out about the model and went away and built us a 5-year plan, and year 5 had us buying the arches. So there you go. That won't be happening.
No, I think
Good for putting
it's
us in
past that now. So I guess what is the plan next? I mean, you say you've got all your releases up to this year. Can you afford to look beyond this year, or
Can artists afford to wait for us to look beyond next year? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think we act on a very much a kind of case by case basis. You know, there will be some things that we'll probably have to let go this year, and we'll probably hate it and regret it. But we do, the way it's looking just now is, you know, we've got Mark's album coming out, which is part of the Talking Financial Year's 2016-17 financial year. I think we'll be able to say what it's kind of out in the domain.
Well, yeah, so our first release of this year will be Teen Canteen's EP. And then we've got records in the pipeline from Medicine Men that we know about. We've announced that.
Yeah.
We're working with Morgan again on an album. We're working with Boo Hoo Hoo on an album. We're working with Sister John on an album. Stephen's apparently recorded Pie 2.
fantastic?
I think by his own terms, he's not sure if it's genius or garbage.
All the best things.
You know, I'm sure it doesn't matter. He'll never decide if it's genius or garbage. We've got another band that we're speaking to that we hope to put out at the end of the year, and I have no doubt Murray will have kittens at me saying this. I have no doubt at some point in the year somebody will turn up waving a band's manifesto and saying we've got to work with these people, and then everybody will bang heads together and make it work. The amount of submissions we get is staggering. I mean,
that's
it's
incredible.
frightening. We've had 3 today alone, and every one we get, I vowed I would reply to everyone personally, and today I've managed to do that, but that's probably been 150, 200 bands I've written to, and of those 150 bands, 141 have been told we can't. But I think I really believe that those 141 bands that we've told we can't to have gone away, not hacked off, not feeling like they don't matter. They've not been ignored. They've not been at the bottom of a pile, and quite a lot of them have gone away with a good sense of goodwill towards us. And maybe in a couple of years we'll find something we like about them or they like about us. But it's really important to me we not be like other record companies. And other record companies' standard response to an approach is just to ignore it.
Absolutely.
I think artists also will kind of have to learn that, you know, if they are wanting to put out something with us, and hopefully we agree to it, there is a turnaround time. You know, so if they come to us with something and say we want to put this out in March, we would have to say absolutely not. One, we've got other stuff in the pipeline, but 2, actually to kind of get the artwork together, to print everything up and to get the record out takes some time. So we did fly by the seat of our pants, and God, we did really well last year. There was a bit of work involved. We also had the right people involved in the label to make that happen. This year, I guess, just because, as Ian said, last year was a kind of development year for, like, you know, Mark and Morgan bringing out 7 inches, Boo bringing out an EP. Now they are moving on to the next stage. So it helps us because they can say to us, well, do you know what? We will have a mini album or an EP or an album ready. Round about this time, so we're a bit more organised, I guess. Which is exciting. I guess that fly by the seat of the pants thing was brilliant last year because, you know, we didn't know what was going to happen, and that was half the fun. We still have lots of fun, but I guess you learn as you go. We've learned a lot. From
I think it's been the biggest learning curve of my life. You know, the things that I know about now that I never even dreamt I'd know. I know so much about MCPS, it's frightening. And that's fascinating, but it's also lovely to look at the bands and see them develop with a sense of comfort. You know, I'm sure I don't know what Mark was thinking when he agreed to release his first record with us. I expect to some extent he was thinking, this will just disappear, this will just be whatever. Because he was basically going with a bunch of it would appear, clueless individuals had never done this before. I'd like to think that everybody that comes to us now has some kind of sense that actually we know what we're doing.
Well, that's
and
why
we
you're
will
getting so many
make it
people
happen. Yeah.
contacting you, because that's the reputation that you've built up over a short period.
Yeah, because Mark actually, when we put his 7-inch out, his album was ready.
Yeah.
But we said, when we met him for that coffee, we kind of said, well, look, we are new. Why don't we put the 7-inch out and let's just see how it goes? So now, by the time it comes to the release of his album at the end of January, we are, I guess, a relatively established label in Glasgow. And
that's better for him because he's releasing his album on a label that's established.
He's releasing it at the right time, absolutely. So it's worked out. And I guess that was that duty of care that we've got with all our artists. We said, well, let's keep the album and let's test the 7-inch first. And then we came up with a plan for Celtic Connections, which has kind of worked well. Again, it's just all...
Which I believe sold out, is that right?
Yeah.
It is, yeah, which is great. But, and again, there was that sense of luck because Urkin Pint, we were in touch with them and they offered us a few dates and we went with the opening night. So if anyone goes on the Celtic Connections website, what's on? Mark's actually
If you can't meet Laura Marling and Mark Johnson.
So you've got the choice. If you don't fancy Laura Marling at the concert,
But that's the other thing, and I think
we should have gone for a bigger venue.
that's what's fascinating about it, is we've put on well, Boo Hoo Hoo sold out, Teen Canteen sold out, Mark Johnson sold out, Launch Night sold out. So people Christmas Effect sold out. And people are coming to so artists are coming to the label with a level of expectation that is well below the level of expectation I think they should have coming to the label. But they come to us and they're basically being told, by signing to Last Night From Glasgow, 200 people will buy your album. Straight off the bat, they're getting it, and they're going to come and perform a gig. And there is absolutely, I mean, you'd be better speaking to the bands to get this, but there's no doubt that it was certainly Boo Hoo Hoo that I worked with very closely. That little period of running from releasing the EP to playing the launch night to them suddenly being named, Radio Scotland Single of the Week. They started that with a set of expectations. Their expectations now are sky high in comparison to that, and a lot of that is just down to the fact that we have this ready-made custom fan base, and it's great when a band come along and clicks, but I think every band has clicked, and the really lovely thing about that is that people have been willing to contribute and do things. So we've got Mark playing an in-store at LP Records round the corner. We've made an agreement with LP Records going forward that they will allow our members to come into store and pick up their records for free. So that means we're not having to post them. They get people through the door, so Mark's repaying them by playing a little gig. When Morgan's record turned up in the house, Morgan turned up with her guitar and her amp and set up in the corner of the living room and played a 25-minute set. And Stephen turned up, and Teen Canteen turned up, and a bunch of members turned up, and there were 40 people in this house on a Monday night with Morgan doing a 25-minute set. And I think everybody sees that, and we're trying to build that community with, we're all record fans, we're all record buying fans, so we don't just want the music industry to succeed, we don't just want bands to succeed. I want LP Records and Love Music and Mono to succeed. So if we can find a way of not being seen as their competition but actually their allies, and get bands to interact and get fans to interact, maybe we can change the world, Murray.
There you go.
We can improve it, definitely. No, I think Ian's made a good point. We love going into records shops. When I was in LP Records at the weekend there, and just having a wander around and flicking through vinyl, and we want our records to be in there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess most of our sales will always be online or at gigs and things. That's just because of the size of the label we are. But if we can get a few records out there, if we know bands that are going to do well, especially if we've worked with them before. So, God, I wish we'd pressed an extra 100 copies of the Teen Canteen album. But it was cool that I think it's cool that it's sold out.
Of course.
And a copy for the Christmas Effect went for 260 quid on eBay. Because there's not any copies out there. But if we were working with them again, we think, do we print more? Especially if we're going up to 200 members. Medicine Men, I think, is going to do really well, judging by the online response to it. But the artists as well will want their records out there.
And I think as well, being able to deliver that audience, as you say, certainly everyone that I've been out for your gigs, it's been rammed, it's been sold out. Now, I go to a lot of gigs, good bands, and sometimes there's maybe 20, 25 folk, if you're lucky, in there, sometimes less. And to be able to say to a band, if you have, at one of our nights, there's going to be a full house for you, then that's why a lot of bands do it.
Yeah.
They want to play in front of sold out.
They want to play to an audience that loves them, and there's lovely little things that happen, So there are people that have joined our label because they were fans of bands, and I could name check stacks of them. People that have come to us because they were fans of Teen Canteen, or they were fans of Boo Hoo Hoo, or they were fans of Mark. And then we've got people who have joined the label and fallen in love with bands, and people who are now, I look on social media and I see Boo Hoo Hoo announcing that they're playing a gig, and suddenly 5 members have rushed in and bought tickets for it because they're in love with this band. And we've got members who are in love with Mark and want to go and see them, and there's people that I know will go and see Morgan when she plays. And we've built up those lovely little pockets of fandom. But the artists recognise it and know them. And let's be honest, I spent my life wanting to be acknowledged by a pop star. You'd go to a gig and hope that they winked at you or smiled at you or shook your hand. Because the truth of it is, everybody's just an honest Joe trying to do well and make a buck. And there's no mystique about it. And as you actually start to work with bands and people, you realise that there's nothing intrinsically different about somebody that writes and records music and somebody that does something completely different. And I think to some extent we've managed to break down that barrier that the artist might feel to the member of the public, but much better for those members, we've given them a platform to kind of meet their heroes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. I think one other point I was just going to make there, Alistair, is that we don't have a contract with any acts. It's very much a handshake. The only thing we ask them is to play a night for our members. They are in complete artistic control over the artwork, the track listing, and they own all the rights to their music.
Yeah, so that kind of freedom's a rare thing as well.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a factory thing again. So if a larger label came in and said we want to re-release Boo Hoo's EP, we say go for it.
We don't want it.
Or Teen Canteen's album, then fine.
Yeah, we leave ourselves open to being abused, but
it's the way you want to do it.
Well, yeah,
and to be able to do it the way that you want, you plan to do it right from the beginning. Something.
I think you have to. I think if you're going to go into a situation and ask bands to trust you, you have to be willing to trust them.
Yeah.
And I think as a board, we've developed that trust with each other as well.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt that not being a profit-driven business makes it incredibly easy to trust people and be trusted by people, because they know there's not any attempt to, the money's got to be spent on something.
Because after we met with Ian from Medicine Men, I think he put up on Facebook something like, a modern day cooperative record label in 2017. Who would have thought? And I guess it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's thinking outside the box, but in some ways it's not. It's just common sense.
So it's not really. If you think about how music began, and the way music was funded centuries ago, it was funded by benevolent individuals paying people to make music. There's really nothing different about what we're doing. Although we call ourselves crowd-funded, I don't actually think it's a crowd-funded concept. I think it's much more charitable in the way it functions. It's very much come in and invest in us and we will invest in the artists and we'll try and make it function. And it's very much the way that, not comparing ourselves to the people, but the way that Beethoven and Bach and Mozart were funded. They were funded by wealthy individuals saying, off you go, write me a symphony. They weren't making their money by playing concerts and selling manuscripts. They were living at the behest of people who thought it was worthwhile to support them. And I think we're a crowd-funded version of that.
I like that, yeah. 18th century princes, Austrian princes. I like that. I'm aware that we've probably been cracking on for an hour. We could probably go on for another couple. Yeah. But I think we'll call it a night there. But thanks very much for doing this, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. No problem at all. And if you haven't checked out Last Night From Glasgow, there's stuff is quality throughout, and get involved, I would say. But we'll be back soon with someone completely different. Cheers. So that was the first podcast of 2017, and I hope you'll have found it as interesting to listen to as I did recording it. What should come over is the passion and naked enthusiasm that Ian and Murray have for what they do, but also the professionalism that they have for what they do. This isn't just some written on the back of a fag packet operation, as I'm sure you now realise. This is something very serious, and I hope that other people can perhaps learn lessons from what Last Night From Glasgow have done. But if you want some hard proof as to their worth, well, we can give you that, because from Mark W. Georgeson's debut album, this is Stay, and it's a beautiful track. It's a beautiful album. Before you hear it, I just want to say thanks again for listening, and we'll be back with you very soon.
I chose to leave my one true love behind, 'cause she could never really love me. But if I had the chance to do it all again, I'd probably say, hey, okay. I left you alone to take a stand, but you still chose him over me. Now I'm the one left, standing all alone in the dark, in the warm summer rain. And if I had to stay and wait, I'd stay and wait for you. And if I had to stay and wait, I'd stay and wait for you. I thought you were an angel coming to save me from my cruel and wicked ways. Women and gambling and drinking every day, but you still wipe my soul clean. My short life's taken many twists and turns. Some were good and some were bad. Best times I had when you were by my side, and I went screwed that all out tonight. And if I had to stay and wait, I'd stay and wait for you. And if I had to stay and wait, I'd stay and wait for you. As I grow a little older, I see the mistakes I make. But every now and then I'll get something right, and show my love for you still burns bright. And if things should come to pass, and our eyes should meet again, I make sure you know how I really feel, and treat each chance I get as my last. And if I had to stay and wait, I'd stay and wait for you. And if I had had to stay and wait, I'd stay and